There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away, nor any coursers like a page of prancing poetry. This traverse may the poorest take without oppressive toll. How frugal is the chariot that bears a human soul. Welcome to Relish Books. Today I'm talking about Emily Dickinson. And I felt like that was the perfect poem for my channel. There's so many Emily Dickinson poems that you could choose from. There's so many different things you could say about her. Again, when you talk about great figures, it can be intimidating because there's already been so much said about them. But it's also fun to just add your own opinion. So I'm just going to talk about her a little bit today. That's probably not my favorite poem of hers, but I love it because it's such a beautiful idea about talking about books. She also has another really beautiful one that's similar, talking about just the freedom that reading gives the poorest person, just like a liberty of the soul, among lots of other really beautiful ones. So what I love about Emily Dickinson is that she has this wonderful mixture of the serious and the ridiculous and the playful. You can't read her too seriously most of the time. You have to, again, sometimes she gets held up so much that people approach her with such almost like reverence and awe, maybe. And you shouldn't. You should just approach her the way that her poetry is written, which is just playful a lot of the time. She really feels like she's just having fun with so much of her poetry. And then a lot of it is more serious. A lot of it's imaginative. I love just reading her poetry and wondering what it means or if it means anything. It feels like she's just writing her thoughts. And I think she really was. I think her talent was for capturing all her wild thoughts and putting them into words. She was not a over meticulous writer. A lot of her poetry rhymes, but sometimes randomly it doesn't. She has a lot of what feels like these jarring, wrong words in her poems because she didn't overthink it. And she did rewrite a lot of things. You can find that like in her journals or whatever, that she did edit and rewrite some things. But for the most part, it was just an outflowing of her soul, of her thoughts, and she wasn't over particular. It was just her expressing her feelings, and she was largely unpublished. She only published 10 poems in her lifetime. And so I think in some ways that could help to not be worried about what people are going to think about it, because she was writing for herself. I think in a sense she was writing for the world too, even if she didn't expect her stuff to be published. I think all writers are writing for other people. Even if they say they're just writing for themselves, I think all writers are also writing for other people, for their readers, and you get a sense of that. But she wasn't worried. She definitely wasn't worried about what people would think of her and of her poetry, because she didn't really think that people were going to read it. She was born in 1830 and died in 1886 at 55 years old. And everybody who knows anything about Emily Dickinson knows that she was very solitary for the most part, and her close friends were mostly all correspondents, so people that she wrote to, because I feel like even in that regard too, the written word was definitely her language and her communication of choice. I actually had the opportunity of going and touring Emily Dickinson's home in Massachusetts, and it was a really, really neat experience. I was kind of like, I don't know how, it's neat, but like how, I don't know how interesting it will be to like see this person's house. I mean, what can you really tell about a person by their house? But it was really, really neat because obviously it was preserved as much as possible the way it was. I got to be in her bedroom, in, the room where she wrote most of her poetry. And the tour guide was amazing. She was just had all kinds of information. Obviously a huge fan of Dickinson, and she could just recite her poetry. So it was just a really, really neat experience, and made me even more of a fan of Emily Dickinson's writing than I had been before. And again, I really think that you can't approach her the way that you approach other poets. She was truly unique because with a lot of other poets, you approach them with expectations. And when they're like very technically good, you hold them to that level and to that expectation. With Emily Dickinson, you can't really do that. You have to just take her thoughts. She's so fun to read. To just, you can sit and just read through a volume of her poetry, no problem, because it's so short, it's so fun and playful, and really thought-provoking. I love that she doesn't over-explain anything. She has these thoughts, and you're left with kind of these vague, shadowy images and ideas and word pictures, and just that you feel like you're on this edge of excitement in a lot of her poetry, and I really love that. I love not knowing all the time what she meant. I like just exploring her thoughts, and I like that you don't have to take her too seriously. You can read some of her poems and be like, okay, that was really blah, that was really not great, that was a really bad poem, and it doesn't matter because it's just this outpouring, and she's very unfiltered, I feel like. Because poets nowadays, they know they're going to be, if they're a well-known poet, they know they're going to be published. They have to do a certain amount of editing. They have a lot of outside influences to help them with their editing. Emily Dickinson, because so little was published in her lifetime, we can only look back, and so everything that she wrote that we have access to has just been published. And I think she was constantly writing poetry. I'm not saying that it isn't poetry, but I think everything she wrote, I think she was writing her thoughts, and her thoughts were in the form of poetry. I feel like her poetry is just the wandering of her mind. So while other poets sit down and write poetry, among other things, maybe these were just her thoughts all the time. This is what she's constantly writing. One of the things that was neat being at her home was they showed us examples of that she would just like write on everything. She would write her poems like on the backs of envelopes, on the backs of receipts. They had just like these scrap papers. I feel like it was on the back of like food wrappers, stuff like that. She was just, and you got this sense of someone who was just literally writing all the time. That was her life and her passion. And so, of course, there's going to be some stuff that's not wonderful because nobody can produce greatness all the time. But it is just, that's who she was. That was just her and her expressing herself through poetry constantly. And I think that that's what really makes her unique. Apart from that, she had, especially for the time period, a very different style, something new, and still, most people, unless they're trying to imitate her, don't really have this style. She's so abrupt, and explosive, and her words are so, I don't know, so different and exciting. Her word choices are very odd. She'll like plop a word in there that doesn't match with the rest, and it somehow gives it that flair of her style, and you see that it's her poetry. You could never mix her poetry up with somebody else's. It's very distinct, very clear. So she's definitely not my favorite poet because her poetry is not like this. They aren't like these shining masterpieces. A lot of the time, they aren't these. They aren't stories. They aren't. They're usually so short too. It's just like a moment. She's really good at just feeling a moment, and that's what I love about her. So she is great and wonderful, and part of her greatness is that you don't take her too seriously. You don't hold her up so high that you give significance to everything she ever wrote just because. You just take it the way it is. And she's really, really great. So much of it is so beautiful, which I think that's why I think that it gives extra depth to her serious poems. Where she seems to be really thinking about life, and a lot of dark thoughts and depressing thoughts are in there too, among all the happy and joyous ones. And all her little light, frivolous, kind of quirky, odd poems give this added depth to when she is being serious and when she is exploring dark thoughts or kind of depressing ideas. It gives extra weight to that she is also so light and joyous a lot of the time. I also just want to say, I feel like not that much is known about Emily Dickinson, of course, because she was so solitary. She didn't, her writing was her life. She didn't get out and do a whole lot other than that. And so there's a lot of speculation about her. A lot of very fanciful ideas about her, and kind of these people want to hope that she had like this whole secret life or something, and I think she did in her imagination, but I feel like very little is known about her, and that's the way that she would have wanted it. That is the way that she lived. I think she would be happy to know that her poetry is known and loved, but I think she lived solitary for a reason. She would not have had to do that. It was definitely a very conscious and deliberate choice. So I don't really think she'd appreciate all the conjecture that people surround her with. I think she kept her life private because that's how she wanted it. So I don't really like all the. I mean, it's always fun to speculate, but I don't like when people start to turn speculations into more concrete ideas about her. I think you can know her spirit through her poetry, and that's the way she would have wanted it. So, those are my thoughts on Emily Dickinson. Let me know what poets you like, if you are an Emily Dickinson fan. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.